Hey, good morning, good afternoon to all of you. I'm going to start sharing with you probably some personal experience, and that's why I think that you will see that in some cases you are not going to find this information in any books or documents. But anyway, I just like to start paraphrasing some of the preambular paragraphs of the UN Declaration of Indigenous Peoples' Rights. And one that I like more than the other ones is not that they are not important, the others, but this one I like it more. So that's why I just like to paraphrasing. And it says recognizing the urgent need to respect and promote the inherent rights of indigenous peoples, which derive from their political, economic, and social structures, and from their culture, spiritual traditions, histories, and philosophies, especially the rights to their lands, territories, and resources. So that's why I like to share with you this. And you will hear also that I'm going to speak about the Human Rights Commission and Human Rights Council, because in the beginning of this century, many things start to change in the United Nations. So that's why the Special Rapporteur on the Human Rights and Fundamental Freedom of Indigenous People was established in 2001 by the United Nations Commission on Human Rights. And as you probably will see, you will see the changes of the mandate, because it has been changed about 3 times already. And I just wanted to share with you some of the mandates, because it's very large, the document. So I just wanted to share with you 3, 4 points of the mandates of the special rapporteurs. And the first one in 2001 was to examine ways and means of overcoming existing obstacles to full protection of indigenous people, human rights, and fundamental freedoms. B was to gather requests, receives, and exchange information and communication from all relevant sources as states and indigenous peoples on alleged human rights violations. Third, makes recommendation and proposal to prevent and remedy violations of indigenous people, human rights, and fundamental freedoms. And one last one that I'd like to share with you is work in close cooperation with other relevant UN regional bodies, because there are many other bodies that you are going to study in this course, and I believe that it's very important that you have to hear that all bodies are coordinating works. The original mandate was also revised, as I was saying, 2004, 2007, 2019, I'm sorry. And the current Special Rapporteur of Indigenous Peoples mandates is based on the Human Rights Council resolution requesting the Special Rapporteur to examine ways and means of overcoming existing obstacles to the full and effective protections of the rights of indigenous people in conformity with her mandate, and to identify, exchange, and promote best practices. B is to gather, request, receives, and exchange information and communications from all relevant sources, including governments, indigenous people and their communities, and organizations as on alleged violation of the rights of indigenous people. It's very important to you notice the change that was done in this paragraph, because in the first mandate, they were talking about states and indigenous peoples. Now they are talking about indigenous peoples and their communities and organizations. That was not in the first mandate. The third mandate is to formulate recommendations and proposals on appropriate measures and activities to prevent and remedy violations of the rights of indigenous people. This is very important because many times in some states, the indigenous people suffer violations, and states like nothing happened because they are indigenous peoples. And that's why the Special Rapporteur has the duty to see that a state had implemented remedy to repair in some cases, but when they are not when it's not the case, at least to give them compensations on that is equivalent of the human rights violation that was occurred on the indigenous peoples. D is to work on in very close cooperation and coordination with other special procedures and subsidiary organs of the Council, in particular with the expert mechanism on the rights of indigenous peoples, relevant United Nations bodies, the treaty bodies, and regional human rights organizations. And as you can see, this mandate is starting to be more broader than the first one, because here the states are talking about treaty bodies, relevant United Nations bodies, regional human rights organizations, and here they are talking about subsidiary organs of the Council, or the Human Rights Council, of course. So this is very important because, as you know, the treaty bodies are the ones who are more, we can probably not qualify, but they have been conform to receive denounces of human rights violations, and they are very, we can say, close to work, not only in recommendations, but also asking them as something that is going to be obligatory for the state to accomplish the recommendation of the treaty bodies. And F, to enhance engagement with and to participate in the annual sessions of the Permanent Forum on Indigenous Issues, and also in the expert mechanism on the right of indigenous people to ensure complementary between their works. Because in the beginning, the state, they were saying that the three mechanisms, they were duplicating the work, and that's why we need to coordinate among ourselves the work that we are doing. And also G, to develop a regular cooperation, dialogue with all relevant actors, including governments, relevant United Nations bodies, specialized agencies and programs, and with indigenous people, national human rights, institutions, non-governmental organizations, and other regional or sub-regional international institutions, including on possibilities for technical cooperation at the request of the government. This is very important also because sometimes probably governments, they believe they are doing a positive work on indigenous peoples, but because the lack of knowledge that they have on the international bodies that protect the indigenous people's rights, they are not doing the correct work to defend the indigenous people's rights. And that's why when a government asks a technical advice, it can be possible that the Special Rapporteur can sign an agreement with them on this advice to the state. And also to promote the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples. As you know, the base of the work of the Special Rapporteur is to ensure the accomplishment of the United Nations Declaration of the Rights of Indigenous Peoples. Okay, now we are going to the, what is the purpose of the mandate of the Special Rapporteur? You know that across the world indigenous people are experiencing the consequences of historical colonization and invasion on their territories. And they face discrimination because of their distinct culture, identities, and ways of life, and are disproportionately affected by poverty and marginalization. Uh, and that's why the mandate was created to not only to analyze, but also to elaborate some recommendation to overcome this situation that indigenous people are living. And this mandate was created to promote good practices, including new laws, government programs, and constructive agreement between indigenous people and the state to implement international standards concerning the rights of indigenous peoples. Many times the state were very, we can say, not angry, but they were so accepting of the work of the indigenous people's special rapporteur, because they thought that the special rapporteur is going to do only criticism against the measures that the state were doing. Of course, the special rapporteur has to criticize all the measures that are violating the human rights of the indigenous peoples. But also, if the states, they are doing a very good practice defending the indigenous people's rights, of course, we have to promote, I have to promote those good practices and let the United Nations know that this state or the other state are promoting those good practices to protect the indigenous people's rights. And of course, the special rapporteur has to recommend and propose an appropriate measure to prevent and remedy violation of the rights of indigenous peoples. As I was saying, I have to do it, and that is something that in some cases I have done already, and then probably sometimes they say they are not going to recognize that it's because a letter or a communication of the special rapporteur that they are doing this or that. But we are sure that we are contributing with our, as in the Mayan people we say, with our grain of corn that on the solution that they are taking in some case or another case. And of course, I have to report to the Human Rights Council of the situation of the indigenous people around the world, and also to the General Assembly. And that's why furthermore, I will speak about those reports. And of course, I have to address specific cases of alleged violation of indigenous people's rights. The current special rapporteur focus, as I was saying before, I am focusing especially on the situation of human rights of indigenous people in urban areas, which will be one of my reports to the General Assembly this year, and indigenous human rights defenders. As you know that if you are a human rights defender, you are putting your life in danger, your family life. But of course, there are many bodies, there are many, also there are many institutions that they are willing to look on the situation of indigenous human rights defenders, and that's why this is one of the issues that I am putting much attention, because all the information that I have, at least in these 9 months of being a special rapporteur, is very worries me, because the situation is increasing the attack to the indigenous human rights defenders. And of course, the rights of indigenous women, children, and persons with disabilities, missing and murdered indigenous women and girls. Sometimes women and girls are the ones who are suffering more directly the discrimination and all the injustice that the society and the state are, we can say, probably not launching, but they are committing against indigenous peoples, because they are the ones who, unfortunately, for very paternalistic society that we have. In some state, women almost doesn't have rights, but that's why we have to bring the attention to the situation of the indigenous women and girls in our studies, but also in any of the action that we are going to do. Women and girls, indigenous women and girls, are the ones who we have to put more attention in any state. Another issue that at least for this special rapporteur is very important is the right for free, prior, and informed consent, especially when they are imposing some development projects, because in many times some states, some transnational, they are saying that indigenous people are against development. But the thing is that sometimes as some cartoons of indigenous people, they were just stating that a company is coming to the community and they're saying, asking them to sell their lands and their water. And in the cartoons, the indigenous people are saying, well, I will have money for one time, but what's happening when the money is going to finish? I will not have money, and I will not have my water and land. I will not have anything. And of course, the transnational, they were very angry and say, oh, these damn Indians, you are against development. So, but the truth is that if transnationals and the state wanted to promote development programs in indigenous territory, they have to consult with the indigenous people to look for their free and prior and informed consent for this project. And of course, doing another issue that I am worried about it is the right of land and resources, including water. And that is very important for me because land, the resources and water are essential for the life, not only for indigenous people, for all people. If we are not taking care of these resources, in the near future, we are not going to have anything, and we cannot drink oil, we cannot eat gold. So that is something that we have to be aware, and we have to protect land and the resources, including water. And this one, I was talking about these issues because those are the elements that are the most vulnerable rights of indigenous people, and that's why they violate the human rights of indigenous people because of these issues. And when those violation is taking place, you can submit information denouncing the violation of the rights of indigenous people. But how to do that? So you have to be very clear when you are submitting those information of violation of human rights of indigenous people. So you have to include specific information about what's happening and what date, what time, the incident details. That is very important because if we don't have enough information, we cannot act in the moment. So, and you have to be very, very clear after saying what date, what time, and you explain the details of the incident. You have to be very clear what article of the United Nations Declaration of the Rights of Indigenous People or other standard was violated by this incident that you are informing. Who carry out the incident? You have to be very clear if there was the government, was a private entity who participated in those incidents. Did they let it occur or neglect to provide protection from the state, because the state have the obligation to protect all their citizens. So the government was acting to protect the right of indigenous people or not? Have any domestic remedies being pursued, for example, doing or putting the case to the national courts? If not, why you are not presenting your case to the court? probably because you don't trust the courts, probably you don't trust the judiciary system. You have to explain why, but not a big explanation. In only one paragraph, you have to say, we don't trust the judiciary system because we have experience with them and they are not responding, they are not answering the rights of to protect the indigenous people's rights. You have to put also in this communication background information. It's very important for you to send background information because in some cases, there are cases that are coming from long time ago taking place. And until now, you are going to put that, or you are going to send, you are going to submit that violations. So to understand why it's happening, we have to have those background information. And of course, you have to summarize the chronology, including past related incident, legislations, actions, etc. You have to provide also a request by the victim asking the reporter to investigate the violation and provide contact information for follow-up. Why we are asking this is because that is not my experience now as a special rapporteur. It's my experience in another body that indigenous organizations present demands, but they don't send information of contact. And after that, they presented the information, but never they done a follow-up. So that means that there was not too, probably that is not very important, or they were not very clear that you have to follow up the case, including in United Nations. And if it's possible, include testimonies from those who experience or witness the violation. But it's very important that people from the community, you have to engage people from the community, your tribal leaders and members, because you have to keep them informed of what is happening. Because sometimes the representatives, they are doing many things internationally, but their community doesn't know what they are doing internationally. That is when they don't have any link, there are not any communication between the acts in the international level and the community of indigenous people. And explain also the outcomes of any domestic remedies. For example, if the court decide that you are able to receive some compensations, and that is very important. And sometimes the court, they decide those positive actions, but the state doesn't accomplish those recommendations of the court. So that is very important for us to know, because then we can pressure the state to accomplish what the national court has been recommended. To commit also to remain engaged and to follow up, including providing additional request information. That is something that I was talking about just before, because it is very important to have a follow-up information. What are the criteria to apply to act on a submissions? Who can submit information and how? What happens with this the submission? It's very important that you have to have the consent of the people, of confidentiality, but also that they are aware to give their names to be published as the main people who are denouncing the violation of this human rights violation. What are the communications? And communication are more than one letter sent by the special rapporteur to the government and others, such as intergovernmental organizations, business, military, or security companies. And just let me share with you an experience that I have. There was a company, a hotel company, that was trying to build a tourist complex in indigenous territory. We sent a letter to them and to the government where this was taking place. And the state didn't answer. but the company answered immediately. Let me tell you that companies in this moment, they don't want to be accused to be violators of human rights or to be called racist because all the action that they are doing is because they are doing in indigenous land. So that is something that you have to be to take in account and to be sure that that one letter can make the difference on one situation in your land. What is the purpose of the communication? The purpose of the communication is for the Special Rapporteur to draw the attention of the government and others on alleged human rights violation. That is something that I was telling you. Nobody wants to be qualified as a, or to be called a human rights violator. Ask that the violations are prevented, stopped, investigated, or that remedial action is taken. And that is very important also because sometimes the action or the human rights violation took already. And that is when the Special Rapporteur is asking them to stop the increasing of violation of human rights. And those human rights have been violated, has to be investigated and has to be compensated. And that is very important that you have to take in account. Of course, all communication that as a special rapporteur I will do in my work, I have to report to the Human Rights Council. And of course, I have to send and reply the received information. Therefore, raising public awareness on individuals and groups, cases as well as legislative and policy development they have addressed in a given period. So it's very important that communication to, we can say, to raise awareness of the indigenous people situation. What do the communication address? The communication will address allegation of violation of human rights of one or more individuals, allegation of violations of human rights of a group or a community, allegation that that a bill, a law, decree, a policy, and or practice is not in compliance with international human rights law and standards. That is very important that you have to be clear that it's not because it's not taking place already. But if you hear, you read, you are aware that a law is going to pass in the Congress or in the Parliament that is going to affect your rights, you have the right to send that information. And the Special Rapporteur has also the duty to contact the state and to prevent them that a law, a decree, or policy is going to affect indigenous people's rights. And the annual thematic reports of the Special Rapporteur on the Rights of Indigenous People, as I was explaining to you before, the Special Rapporteur has to do a study, two studies, especially two studies, to report to the Human Rights Council and to the General Assembly. For this year, I will do the impact of COVID-19 on indigenous people in the urban areas, which as you probably know, they are the more affected because they don't have where to go. It's supposed to be that indigenous people are living only in rural areas, but that is not true. The last report of ILO convention or the ILO, it said, the ILO is the International Labor Organization, it stated that 52% of indigenous people around the world live in urban areas. 48% of the indigenous people are living in rural areas. So that's why it's very important, the study, to let the state how is the situation of the indigenous people living in the urban areas. The reported or the study that I will submit to the Human Rights Council is a follow-up of the impact of COVID-19 on indigenous peoples in their communities. So there is another issue also that is very important that you have to take in account. And when you know that a special rapporteur, not only the indigenous people rapporteur, but any rapporteur that is coming to your country, you have to take advantage of that, and you have to ask an appointment with her or him, because it's very important. the Special Rapporteur is going to report directly to the General Assembly and to the Human Rights Council. That is called country visits. The Special Rapporteur carry out country visits to assess the situation of human rights of indigenous people in national level. At the request of the Special Rapporteur, the government will send an invitation for a fact-finding mission. Some countries have issued standing invitation, which means that they are, in principle, prepared to receive any visit of any Special Rapporteur. But you know that when they state that is because they are trying to say, well, we are open to United Nations to visit us, but you have to be very careful because that declaration sometimes is because they don't want to have visit of a Special Rapporteur. In any case, even that that was stating, I have to ask permission to the state to visit the country to make a country visit. Well, with this, I will hope that I share with you all the information of the work of the Indigenous People Special Rapporteur. I will thank you to Access Project for giving me the opportunity to address you and to share this information. So thank you very much.